Part 2. Putting demonstration to work. In Part 1, we figured out what a demonstration is, a coordination pattern the learner perceives, largely below awareness, most useful when the movement organization itself is new. Now we get practical and ask how to deliver one well, because even a powerful tool can be used clumsily. Part 2 works through 5 real decisions you'll face. First, who should demonstrate? And here, the obvious answer, the expert, turns out to be incomplete in a way that surprises most people. Second, timing and frequency. When in the lesson should the demos come, and how many? Third, a channel we forget because we're so visual, auditory modeling, for skills that are really about rhythm and timing rather than shape. Fourth, the theory question you're most likely to be tested on. Why does observing a movement help you produce it? And what are the 2 competing explanations? And fifth, an honest caveat, the ideal form myth that keeps us from over-applying everything else. So this section moves from the practical mechanics of demonstrating into the theory of why it works, and back out to a caution about its limits. The unifying idea is that demonstration is a flexible tool with rules of use. Match the model, the timing, and even the sensory channel to the learner and the skill. Let's start with the question of who should be doing the demonstrating.
First practical question: who should demonstrate? The textbook's default answer is the obvious one, a skilled model who performs the skill correctly. And there are good reasons. A correct demo gives the learner 2 things: the coordination pattern, yes, but also the strategy the model uses to solve the movement problem, which learners then copy on their first attempts. But here's the surprising, almost counterintuitive finding that I want you to remember. Beginners can learn a great deal from watching other beginners. When a novice watches another novice struggle, make an error, get corrected, and try again, it pulls them into active problem solving, figuring out what works rather than just copying a polished performance. The classic demonstration of this is Hebert and Landon's tennis volley study, where groups who observed other learners practicing beat a control group that just practiced. The practical tool is dyad practice. Pair people up. One performs while the other observes, ideally with a checklist of key points. Then they swap. Both the doer and the watcher learn. So who demonstrates isn't only the expert. Sometimes a fellow beginner, errors and all, is exactly the right model, because watching someone solve the problem can teach more than watching someone who has already solved it.
Next, timing and frequency. When and how often to show. Remember that a demonstration conveys an invariant pattern, which logically means one viewing is rarely enough. The more chances a beginner gets to observe the pattern, the better they can extract it. So frequency helps. But timing matters too, and a nice study by Weeks and Anderson in 2000 pinned it down. They taught a volleyball overhand serve and gave 10 demonstrations on 3 different schedules, all before practice, sprinkled one at a time between trials, or front-loaded in 2 blocks. The all before and the combination schedules, the ones that front-loaded the demos, produced better form and accuracy than sprinkling them in one at a time. The rule of thumb: demonstrate several times before the learner begins, and keep re-showing through the early going as needed. One footnote worth knowing: when you let learners decide for themselves when they want a demo, they ask shockingly rarely, often before fewer than 10% of their trials. Left to their own devices, people undersample the very information that would help them, which is a good argument for the instructor staying in charge of the demonstration schedule early on, rather than waiting to be asked. Now a form of demonstration we forget about because we're so visual: auditory modeling. For some skills, the goal isn't a shape in space, it's a timing, a rhythm, a beat. And for those, letting the learner hear the pattern can work better than letting them see it. Duty, Bird, and Ross had people learn a movement with a precise target time of about 2 seconds. The group that heard the audio of a skilled performance hit the timing more accurately than the group that watched a silent video. And Woots and Buchers found that complete novices learned the rhythmic timing of a 32-step dance sequence just as well from sound alone as from seeing and hearing the model. Think about how intuitive this actually is once you notice it. A music teacher claps a rhythm, a rowing coach calls a cadence, a physical therapist counts a gait tempo. A sprint coach has athletes listen to the rhythm of their foot strikes. When the thing to be learned is timing, put it in the learner's ears, not just in front of their eyes. The beat lives there. So before you demonstrate visually, ask whether the heart of this skill is a shape or a rhythm, because that answer can change which sense you teach to.
So we've established that demonstration works and how to deliver it. But why does observing a movement help you produce it? There are two competing theories, and this is a classic exam question, so let's be clear on both. The first is Bandura's cognitive mediation theory, and it's the more established view. It says that when you watch a model, your brain translates what you see into a symbolic memory code, a stored mental representation. Why translate it into a code? So the brain can rehearse it, organize it, and later use it both as a guide for performing and as a standard for catching your own errors. The key feature? There's a mental middle step between seeing and doing. The second theory is the dynamic view, proposed by Scully and Newell from J.J. Gibson's idea of direct perception. It questions whether you need that symbolic step at all. It argues the visual system can directly constrain the motor system to act on the invariant information it picks up. No memory code required. Perception flows more or less straight into action. In the sketch, that's the crossed-out thought bubble. Which is right? Honestly, there's no conclusive winner. Both have evidence for specific claims. Cognitive mediation has been studied more, but the dynamic view is growing. The real question dividing them is simply whether the brain needs that middle translation step between watching and doing. Because cognitive mediation is the one you're most likely to be tested on, let's open it up. Bandura said 4 sub-processes govern all observational learning, and they form a clean chain: attention, retention, reproduction, motivation. First, attention. You can only encode what you actually attend to, which is why full, focused attention on the demo matters far more than idle watching. Steve Marie showed that making people do a distracting mental task while observing wrecked their learning. Second, retention. You transform what you saw into symbolic codes and store them, helped by rehearsing, labeling, and organizing. And blocking that rehearsal hurts learning. Third, reproduction. You translate that stored representation back into physical action, which of course requires that your body is actually capable of the movement. And fourth, motivation. Even with the first 3 in place, nothing happens unless you have the incentive to perform it. Attention, retention, reproduction, motivation. 4 links, and the chain only works if all 4 hold. As a teacher, that's a diagnostic gift. When a demonstration doesn't take, you can ask which link broke. Were they not attending? Did they fail to retain it? Can their body not yet reproduce it? Or do they simply not care to? Each break has a different fix. Before we leave demonstration, one honest caveat, because I don't want you to over-apply any of this. There's something the authors call the ideal form myth. So many factors shape how any individual organizes a movement: their body, their history, their build, their injuries, that it's highly unlikely a single universal correct form is right for every learner. What a researcher labels a skilled demonstration isn't necessarily the ideal for the person standing in front of you, whose body isn't the model's body. And there's a subtler risk. When you hand learners a finished, ready-made solution to a movement problem, you can actually short-circuit the very problem-solving that learning depends on. The active search that, back in Part 2's opening, we saw makes peer observation so valuable. So demonstrate, but hold it a little loosely. Show the pattern, then leave the learner room to find their own path to the goal. Demonstration should inform the search, not end it. That humility is what separates a coach who imposes a template from one who develops an athlete.
Quick recap of Part 2. A skilled model shows the correct pattern and strategy, but beginners watching beginners spark valuable, active problem solving, so don't overlook dyad practice. Give several demonstrations before practice and repeat them early and often, because learners left to ask will undersample. For skills defined by timing and rhythm, reach for auditory modeling. Teach the ear, not just the eye. 2 theories explain why observation works. Cognitive mediation, where a symbolic memory code mediates between seeing and doing. And the dynamic view, where vision directly drives action. And Bandura's 4 processes: Attention, retention, reproduction, and motivation structure the first one and give you a way to diagnose a demo that didn't land. But remember the closing caveat. There's no single ideal form that fits everyone, and a demonstration handed over too completely can crowd out the learner's own discovery. Demonstration is a flexible tool with rules of use. Now let's pick up the other great channel, words.